Hi, Year 10 and parents. I'm Bodhi, one of the school prefects, and I've been asked to talk about scaling, moderation, the ATAR, plus a few little other things. There's a lot of confusion and myths surrounding these concepts that I just wanted to clear up so that Year 10 students can make the most informed decisions about their subjects. And I have personal experience with this whole process because I was accelerated in English Advanced last year, which means that I sat my HSC for English a year early. Before we get into it, there are a few concepts and acronyms that I'd like to define. So the HSC is the Higher School Certificate. There's a slight difference between unit and subjects. So most subjects or courses are 2 units, but extension courses are 1 unit each. The preliminary course refers to Year 11, and in Year 11 all students must study at least 12 units. The HSC course refers to Year 12, and all students must study at least 10 units, which means that they can drop 2 units in between Year 11 and Year 12. NESA is the New South Wales Education Standards Authority, and they write the HSC exam and they do all the moderation of marks. Then you have UAC, which is the University's Admission Centre, and they're responsible for admission to university and the calculation of the ATAR. And finally, the ATAR is the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank. In December of your HSC year, NESA will provide you with a HSC mark for every course that you've completed, and the HSC mark is an average of your school assessment mark and the mark you receive in the external HSC exam. So 50% of your exam is therefore determined by school assessments and 50% is determined by your performance in the external HSC exam. And so this is the printout that I received from NESA at the end of last year for English Advanced. So as you can see, I received a mark of 96 out of 100 in the exam, and my assessment mark was 95 out of 100, and the average of those is obviously 95.5, and when it's a half mark, it gets rounded up to the nearest whole number, which yields a HSC mark of 96. However, there's a difference between the raw marks that you receive and the marks that you will be given by NESA when you are given your final HSC results. So we're just going to go through my marks for each of the tasks from English Advanced, and then we'll compare my average raw mark to the mark that I got of 95 from NESA to kind of show you the moderation process and how that works. So here's the printout from school that you get in your assessment booklet. So as you can see, I received 18 out of 20 for task 1, 20 out of 20 for task 2, 20 out of 20 for task 3, and in the trial, which is task 4, I received 97 out of 100. So that's an average raw mark of 97 out of 100, and my final rank in the year was 5 out of 180 students. But schools use different assessment tasks, and the way they are marked varies from school to school. So this means that students from different schools experience different assessment conditions. And this is why NESA adjusts assessment marks using a process called moderation. And this ensures that it's fair between all schools. So moderation adjusts school assessment marks based on the HSC exam, since all students complete this under the same conditions. Moderation maintains the rank order of students within the school group and the relative gaps between them, which I'll explain on the next slide. So the process of moderation adjusts assessment marks using 3 anchor points. The first one is the mean of the school group's assessments is adjusted to equal the mean of the exam marks obtained by the students in that group. So we're going to see another example on a few slides down, but basically if the average of the school assessment marks was 86 and the average that year got in that course in the HSC exam was 88, then 86 would be equated to 88, if that makes sense. And the second anchor point is that the top assessment mark in a school group is adjusted to equal the highest exam mark obtained by any student in that group. And where possible, the bottom moderated assessment mark is adjusted to equal the lowest exam mark obtained by any student in that group. When moderating school assessment marks for a course, NESA uses the total number of marks earned by students at the school in the HSC exam for that course. The moderation process distributes the total of these marks to students in the school group in a way that keeps the same rank order as the school assessment marks submitted to NESA. So here we have an example provided on the NESA website, and we have students A through to F, and we have their school assessment mark, their examination mark, and their moderated assessment mark. So student A received was ranked first with an assessment mark of 90, and they also achieved the highest mark in the exam of 92. That means that their moderated assessment mark must be 92, because that's one of the anchor points that NESA uses to moderate assessment marks. And if we go down here, we see that the rank order that the students were in the school for the school assessment mark is different to the rank order they were for the examination mark, because students performed differently in the exam conditions. However, the moderated assessment marks have to be ranked in the same way that the school assessment marks were ranked to maintain those ranks and relative gaps between the students at the school. So here we can see that while student B were ranked second in the school assessment marks, they were ranked third in the examination mark because they got a mark of 72, whereas student C got a mark of 80, which is higher than 72. However, for the moderated assessment mark, they remain at second because they were ranked second in the school assessment marks. We're going to move on from school assessment marks and talk about exam marks now, but we'll get back to the moderated assessment marks in a little bit. So as exam and marking guidelines change every year, NESA uses a process called standard settings to align raw exam marks and moderated assessment marks to the performance band descriptors, allowing student marks to be compared over different years. Each course has 6 performance bands. Band 6 represents the highest level of achievement and Band 1 the lowest. So here I have an example from the NESA website of the performance band descriptors for Bands 5 and Band 6 for modern history. So we can highlight some of the differences between a Band 6 and a Band 5. So in this first dot point here, to get a Band 6, you must demonstrate extensive knowledge. However, to get a Band 5, you only demonstrate thorough knowledge. If we go down the list, we can see these adjectives change. So Band 6 is comprehensive, Band 5 is well developed. And teachers often go to professional learning days to have a strong grasp of what these adjectives actually mean in terms of student work, and they'll look at student exemplars so that everyone's marking at the same level, or trying to get teachers to mark at the same level. So then these performance bands are used to align the raw marks to achievement standards. So there's a supervisor of marking for each course, which will recommend a team of markers to decide the minimum raw mark needed in each exam to meet the achievement standard for each performance band. And these marks are the cutoff marks for the HSC exam. So the cutoff mark for Band 6 is adjusted to 90. So in a hypothetical course, let's say that the judges or the markers decided that the minimum raw mark a student had to get a Band 6 was 82. So that student gets a mark of 82. That means that mark will be adjusted to a 90 because they've met the performance band descriptor for a Band 6. And it's important to note that a mark of 100 stays at 100 and a mark of 0 stays at 0. So applying all this knowledge and concepts to my personal journey in the HSC last year. So I received a raw mark of 95 out of 100 in the external HSC exam for English Advanced, and this was the highest mark achieved in this course at Gosford High. After alignment, this mark was moved to a final exam mark of 96 out of 100, and the school marks are moderated accordingly. So the student who was ranked first in the school before the HSC would have received 96 out of 100 as their assessment mark, because remember, the top mark achieved in the HSC exam has to be the top mark that the student who was ranked first gets for their moderated assessment mark. But that student who ranked first may have received a lower mark for their exam mark. And as I was ranked fifth, my school mark was moderated to 95 out of 100, which makes sense because I was only 4 spots behind the top student, and the top student would have got 96 for their school mark. Now I want to talk about the calculation of the HSC mark. So the HSC mark is calculated by taking the average of the moderated school assessment mark and the aligned exam mark. If the average is a decimal, it is rounded up to the nearest whole number. So looking again at my printout from NESA, I got 96 out of 100 for the exam, 95 out of 100 for my assessment mark. The average of that is obviously 95.5, but because it's a decimal, it's rounded up to 96. Before moving on to scaling, I just wanted to talk about some useful resources. So the first one is the raw marks database, which shows the relationship between raw exam marks and their aligned marks provided by former students for all courses, and I've put the link there. And the second one is HSC Ninja, which shows the average number of Band 6s in a particular course at any school. So in the table below, I have 4 courses: English Advanced, Maths Advanced, Economics and Chemistry, and the number of Band 6s achieved by students at Gosford High School from 2020 to 2016. So on average, in English, we get 35 Band 6s, in Maths, we get 41 Band 6s, in Economics, we get 3 Band 6s, and in Chemistry, we get 7 Band 6s. It's important to remember that most of the students at our school study Maths Advanced, and all students have to study English Advanced, hence the larger number of Band 6s as opposed to Chemistry and Economics, which have a much smaller candidature. If you apply this sort of method to your own courses, it can be useful in determining the rank you would need to get a band 6. However, that's just an approximation, and it's important to remember that there's lots of fluctuations between each year, because you can have some years that are better at maths and other years that are better at English and so forth. So it's important to remember that. So now we're moving on to scaling. And scaling is the process by which UAC compares relative performances across different subjects. For example, an aligned mark of 88 in Maths Extension 1 cannot be compared to a 94 in Physics. You can't say that a 94 in Physics is better than an 88 in Extension 1. One subject might be more difficult than the other, and each subject mark are not on the same scale. The only way we can compare marks across different subjects is to have a fair process which converts marks from different subjects into marks on a common scale. And this is what scaling attempts to do. So to begin the scaling process, UAC takes the raw HSC mark, which is the average of a student's raw examination mark, and raw moderated assessment mark, which is the marks before they've been aligned to the performance band descriptors. So UAC takes this raw HSC mark of every student in every course and standardizes them so they have a mean of 25 and a standard deviation of 12 on a 1 unit basis. And when I mean 1 unit basis, I mean that most subjects are worth 2 units, which means they're out of 100. So obviously if it's 1 unit, it means it's out of 50, and a mean of 25 is right in the middle of 50. And the model underpinning the scaling algorithm specifies that the scaled mean in a course is equal to the average academic achievement of the course candidature, where for individual students, the measure of academic achievement is taken as the average scaled mark in all courses completed. I'm struggling to say that because it's a bit of a mouthful and doesn't make much sense, so I've tried to explain it in an easier way. So basically, what that means is that a course's cohort performance in their other subjects determines the scaled marks in each course. And if you're still confused, I'm going to explain that a little bit more on the next slide. Tying into what I said before, often students ask why are some subjects scaled higher than others? And technically, how difficult a subject is has no effect on how well it scales. How well a subject is scaled depends on how well its candidature does relative to your whole cohort, if your whole cohort did that subject hypothetically. This is the reason why English is compulsory, because it is used as a cohort benchmark from which all relative candidature performances are statistically compared. Therefore, the better the candidature for a particular subject does in their other subjects, the better that subject will be scaled. And the next question that students often ask is, how does scaling affect me? And technically speaking, scaling shouldn't affect you at all, because it is the mechanism which compensates for differences in subject difficulty and candidature quality. Consider this example. In 2020, you would have needed to be in the top 10% in geography or legal studies to score a similar scaled mark as you would have if you're in the top 25% for economics. This is because scaling has determined that due to the relative performances among all candidature, the legal studies and geography candidature are less able than the economics candidature. Hence the need to be in a higher percentile bracket in those courses to be equivalent to a lower percentile in economics. In other words, your higher percentile requirement is compensated by the fact that your peers in geography and legal studies is on average less able than your peers in economics. However, if you're passionate about legal studies and you are able to score in the top 1%, that is so much better for your ATAR than doing something that you're not interested in, but with better scaling and scoring in the bottom 10%. So once UAC takes these scaled marks, they calculate the ATAR from the sum of your top 10 scaled units, and this is known as your aggregate out of 500. And it's important to remember that the ATAR is a rank, not a mark. So if you get an ATAR of 99, it means that you had a better aggregate than 99% of your peers. So if we see here on this, on the chart next to it here, we have the relationship between aggregate and ATAR. So as the aggregate increases, ATAR obviously increases. And applying that to my marks, so my raw HC marks scaled to 47.27 out of 50. And if I perform equally as well in my other courses, that will result in an aggregate of 472.7. And in 2020, that would have been an ATAR of 99.90. But remember that each year students perform differently, so you can't really compare ATARs between years. So some more useful resources include the UAC scaling report, and that's published each year by UAC and provides a lot of useful information on the HSC and the ATAR. For example, this table below is a screenshot I took from the UAC scaling report, and it shows the most common courses that students did. Students that got ATAR between 99 and 99.95 did. So as we can see, 18% of students scoring an ATAR above 99 did biology. So it's really interesting if you want to have a look at that in your own time. And another one is also ATAR calculators. And these are, a lot of tutoring companies have these, and you can enter individualized marks and it will run the calculations and tell you what your predicted ATAR would be, within a margin of error. So some important things to remember. You can only affect your performance, not the performance of other students. Help other students in your cohort, the better you all perform in the HSC, the better you perform individually. And I've seen sort of first-hand examples of this. So in my leadership role, I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of students from the top Sydney selective schools, such as James Roos, and they have a really good culture of helping each other out there, which is, could explain why they do so well in the HSC. So the ATAR is a rank, not a mark. And remember, don't choose subjects based on their scaling. Do subjects you're passionate about and will do well in. I hope that's made sense. It's can seem a little bit complicated and daunting at first, but once you wrap your head around it, it's not that hard. And all the information that I've said here can be found on the NESA and UAC websites. If you have any further questions, you can email me at bodie.mcnallyeducation@nsw.gov.au, or alternatively, my Instagram at bodie_mcnally. And while you're there, you may as well follow at GHS Leadership Team to see some of the wonderful things we're doing over there. Thanks, everybody.